Alrighty, so thanks everyone for tuning to this episode of Find Your Cause. Today we have Marlon Richardson, who is the Executive Director of Hip Hop for Change. Marlon, how's your day going so far today?
So far, so good. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. We actually interviewed Hip Hop for Change a couple years back now, so it's been a while. So I'm excited to hear how things have developed over the past couple years. But before we get started, what is the mission of Hip Hop for Change?
So, Hip Hop for Change is an Oakland based arts education nonprofit, and we specialize in preserving the foundational history of hip hop and giving exposure to all the expressive elements of hip hop, kindergarten through 12th grade, through our programs, our after school programs, our assemblies, and all of that. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're using hip hop as a transformative means of creating social change in our communities, but also with ourselves. Hip hop being a great unifier and being extremely popular, especially with young people now. It's leveraging that transformative spirit into actual on the ground change in communities and individuals, and then hopefully seeing that impact locally as well as globally.
All right. What about hip hop allows that to be possible? I love to hear your story of what's
Yeah.
so transformative about hip hop.
Well, I think hip hop in and of itself is transformative by nature. I think it's what I like to call remix culture, right? We've remixed since the 70s. We've remixed old records. We've remixed fashion. We've remixed the way that we look at community events. Hip hop has just been the great remixer of American culture and making it something original in and of itself. So leveraging that as remix culture, what we're ultimately looking to remix is ourselves, the communities that we come from, and those to aid and assist some of those more underserved communities who can use hip hop as a means of improving the world around them.
Yeah. And when you say remix, I don't want to put a description in your mouth, but do you mean highlighting the positive things, highlighting the things that need to change? What do you mean by remix?
Ultimately, what we're trying to do is really get down to creating safe and brave spaces for individuals to express themselves freely. You express yourself based on your source material. So you're only reflecting what the world is giving you, right? So things that your parents are saying, things that you're learning in school, things that you're learning about the world as we're going on. And it's a crazy world right now. So I think hip hop over the last 50 some odd years has created an avenue and a vehicle for young, marginalized kids to not only find their power through these creative arts, but then also build up communities so that they're able to freely speak about what's going on in their own world and what there's going on in their own lives. And they're able to do so with confidence, with charisma, and have fun doing it at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. I 100% agree with that. And like, I feel like if you like all the self-help gurus and nowadays, a lot of the things that they preach are to like have diaries and to reflect on your day and to share what you're grateful about, which is all good and it works for a lot of people. But I think you highlighted
Mhm.
something of the fun aspect of hip hop, and I feel like you could get all the same benefits of that reflection, of that pausing, of that diary or journaling, but doing it a different way that might resonate more with people differently and might be a completely different outlet, but it ends with the same outcome of being able to share your thoughts, to share your feelings, etc. So it's an amazing way, an outlet
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, I think ultimately everybody needs some level of a creative outlet, right? Especially kids from underserved communities or even kids who are having trouble in school. So I think being able to utilize hip hop as a means of saying, hey, here are all these amazing ways that you can freely express yourself, right? And giving them mentorship in these roles emboldens them and empowers them to really take on that mantle and be able to express themselves through these different mediums. So we're not just talking about writing raps and performing them. We're also talking about beat making, DJing, which is ultimately music curation, graffiti art. And then the fifth element is knowledge, right? And there's breakdancing as well. So there's all these different means of being able to express yourself. And I think it always requires some level of tutelage to be introduced to them, but then also have some level of guidance as to how to approach these forms of expression in a way that's actually going to help you, right? Whether you're dealing with emotional problems or there's things going on in your neighborhood, I think each of these different creative and expressive elements has some means of helping you address these issues, but more particularly addressing the things that you're kind of going through yourself. whether it's mental health issues or things in the household or whatever. It gives you this outlet. And then by continuing to move in this pathway, you're going to meet like-minded individuals that you can actually build a community with, so that you all can address problems in your community with various solutions, as opposed to just one size fitting all and everything.
Yeah, awesome. Marlon, this is amazing. That's an amazing mission for an organization. Why you? What's your story? Why is this something that you're diving into?
Oh, I don't dive into it as much as I was born into it, right? Like, I'm born and raised in New York City. Hip hop has been such a critical part of my life from as long as I can remember. I started rapping at 10 years old, and I was rapping literally like improvisationally off the top of my head, coming up with rhymes, because I was watching music videos and I saw people who looked like me express themselves with a level of confidence and a level of passion that really captivated me. And this is at a time very young where I have a very unique life. I grew up with a mother who was white and Jewish. I was very young Afro-Latino kid in New York City who was in predominantly white spaces for an early part of my life. And that just made me hyper aware. It made me reflect a lot. It gave me a lot of introspection. So to be able to go through that and then see people who look like me express themselves so eloquently using rap and getting on the microphone and spitting rhymes really inspired me. So by the time I was 13, inspired by a bunch of other rappers, people like Nas and Wu-Tang and all of that, I really just took to it, and I started buying notebooks and writing my raps in there. And so hip hop from the age of 10 onward has really been a guiding force in my own life. And I was blessed enough in my 30s to become a hip hop educator and be able to teach kids songwriting, and from a volunteer basis. And then I really started taking it seriously. I quit my job. I was doing insurance at the time. So I quit my job, wanting to get back to my artistic roots, and started teaching kids beat making as a mental health intervention, getting trained in dynamic mindfulness and restorative justice practices and nonviolent communication, really getting skills to be in the classroom. And I took my experience, and then I was blessed to join the ranks of Hip Hop for Change as education director. That was my foray into this organization. And from there, it gave me an amazing opportunity to feel empowered to create my own curriculum and to develop a training model that I can then train other local artists to be educators in the classroom and serve as mentors in their community, teaching their craft and their specialty to the next generation. So I've always been about hip hop. My life is a testament to the transformative nature of the culture. I've always been an ambassador for it. And since then, I've carried that torch. I've done international programs. I'm a hip hop diplomat with the State Department and through the Next Level program. So I've been to several different countries just teaching about hip hop or teaching hip hop in general. El Salvador, Dubai, the Barbados, all these different countries, as well as locally here in the Bay Area and around the country, giving lectures at Harvard University or some other colleges, but also in the classroom, kindergarten through 12th grade, teaching kids, doing assemblies, all of that. So it's been really a work of passion. It's been a labor of love. And I've just been trying to figure out more creative and really great ways of scaling it and bringing it so that hip hop education as a movement has a national and international presence and is in the conversations that are being had about education in America.
Yeah. Wow. And I think that's a great transition to the programming. It sounds like you said your entry into Hip Hop for Change was education director. How has that role evolved for you, and how has the programming that Hip Hop for Change offers evolved that you guys all provide for the community K to 12?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved so much in that I've learned a great deal about myself through this process, but then also just about teaching kids. So our organization has a great history. What started as a grassroots movement to just get paid performance opportunities for artists, local artists, then evolved into an education program. And at the time that I came in, I think we were just doing assemblies. We were just teaching kids the history of hip hop. And I looked at that and I said, we need to create bolder and more prolonged partnerships. So that's when I developed a multi-week program using the assembly model as our entry point. but then developing it into an after school model, a during school model where we're actually partnered with, say, the math department or the English department for a specific grade. And now we're doing multi-week programming with a deliverable at the end of the program. So kids are learning about the culture, they're learning about hip hop in and of itself, they're safely engaging in all the elements with mentorship, and then they kick out a really dope hip hop project or exhibit at the end of each of our programs. And in that, we're building community because now you have kids that you've taught in, say, sixth grade that now you're teaching again in eighth grade. Now maybe you've done an assembly at their high school. Maybe they're looking for internships towards the end of their high school career. And now you're able to provide them those opportunities. We've actually just hired one of our very first program participants coming out of one of our programs is now an employee at Hip Hop for Change. So that kind of long-term goal has always been in my mind since I was an education director, and going through the business of developing our programming and our partnerships, I then got the opportunity to really step up and be our executive director. We went through a lot of different transitions. Our former executive director and our founder resigned. And that was really a calling for me to really step up and maintain the work that we've been doing, and then really shifted and doubled down on the arts education part that we've seen and has been proven is the most successful and most effective part of what we do as an organization. And it taps in to the larger national conversation around education, but more particularly culturally responsive and culturally affirmative education in order to engage kids who don't really have or may not necessarily feel all the way contributing to their own academic success. So we're coming in, giving them something that they're familiar with, something that they already have an affinity towards, and we're using that saying, hey, you can use this as a means of doing better in school. You can use this as a means of being able to communicate better. You can use this as a way of regulating your own emotions. So social emotional learning, mental health practices, all of these things are built and baked in to our curriculum and to our programming. So what we're ultimately remixing and transforming are the students more so than the communities, because the communities can't change unless the conditions of the people in the community change. So that's where we step in. And it's been
Yeah.
great. I've been learning a lot as an executive director. I've taken some executive coaching classes and really looking at things big picture. And that's been a learning curve over the last maybe 2 years that I've been doing it. But I think I finally, maybe this year, have hit my stride along with other opportunities presenting themselves for the organization. So now it's a time for us like to say, you know what? All of these things have converged right now for a reason. And it's high time that we really take advantage of it and move to the next level come 2026.
Yeah. Wow. You all have provided programming for ton of kids so far. I'd love to hear any updated data you have on the amount of folks that you've been working with so far, and also any other like KPIs or things you're trying to measure. Because you mentioned a couple things like beat making as a mental health improvement mechanism, mentorship, a lot of parts of the programming that you mentioned providing in schools. It sounds like there's very specific things or parts of a child's development process that you're trying to improve. So I'd love to hear how many people have you worked with so far, and what are some of those the metrics that you're trying to measure?
Yeah, absolutely. The big power metric is we've served 50,000 program participants over the 12 years that we've been in existence as an organization, right? Now, that's a vanity metric for the most part. When you tell people that, it sounds impressive and it's great. But when you get granular, what does that mean? And what that means is 84% of those kids have used hip hop to be more interested in school. That's one of our statistics. Further to that, it's like being able to develop curriculum that helps with social emotional learning. And how are kids in schools, especially younger grades, say sixth grade below, how are we giving them tools to regulate their emotions so that they can learn? So just having teachers or our educators who are coming in being trained as local artists, having a mastery of their own element, but then being trained as an educator, we're also training them in not only dynamic mindfulness, how to regulate the nervous system through breathing and breath work and meditation, as well as visualization, but then also they're trauma informed. So they have an understanding of how trauma can show up in the classroom and how to address it. But our social emotional learning component that's built into our curriculum for those younger students is one of the things that we've been taking a bigger look at now in terms of what are the KPIs there? How many kids were at risk before and they may be getting better grades now? But then in the older grades, what we're doing is creating a pipeline for workforce development. So we're literally creating a pipeline for kids to learn about hip hop history, hip hop culture, engage in some of these elements like beat making or digital music production. And then how can we leverage that to transferable resume building skills that can get you employed or have you employ yourself as an entrepreneur within the hip hop music industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So the money's there, the interest is there. You have a lot of investment coming from tech companies within the music industry. But for me, there's also a social justice component. So it's not just workforce development and creating platforms, it's how do we create an active counter narrative to the stereotypes that are perpetuated through mainstream corporately co-opted hip hop music that often, all too often, is painting young black and brown people as hyper violent, hyper misogynist, hypersexual, some of these negative stereotypes that have real world consequences in the way that young people of color are interacting with the police or how the justice system views young people of color. They're seeing them through the lens of these stereotypes that are perpetuated by these corporations. But if we're able to create a community-based counter narrative where people have real-world examples of people who are utilizing hip-hop for the power of good and for transforming communities, I think it gives people a new frame of reference. So whether that's our educators who are coming in and are also active artists in the community doing performances, or if it's our young people who are building their own hip hop clubs by the time they're getting into college, or they're doing hip hop performances in their fifth grade graduation or something like that, you're starting to see how we're just paving the road for maybe the next 10, 20 years of what we can see within our workforce, within our political system, as well as our education system.
Yeah. Wow. Perpetuated stereotypes being perpetuated by corporations. Educate me a little bit. What do you mean by that?
What we've recognized in hip hop culture is that over the last maybe 30 years, corporations have taken a great deal of interest in the culture. As by 1996, hip hop grew from a party that started in the Bronx to a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when that happens, along with the Telecommunications Act that happened the same year, you get these large corporations buying up all these mom and pop radio stations and then narrowing the stories, the narratives that are being told through hip hop culture. These rappers who are getting on and speaking to their real world experiences now, they feel compelled to have to maybe drum up some of the gangster image that they've, you know what I'm saying, may have had experience with, or now they're being encouraged or financially incentivized to be a little bit more hypersexual than they may be
Mm,
used to. All of this is a coordinated effort to drum up some of the more, I would say, base behavior of just human beings to develop a business model and to develop a revenue model and to keep people active in certain behavior that has adverse consequences in black and brown communities because we're looking at it on TV and it seems like it's being glorified. And then those are the same people who are then getting locked up for crimes, who are doing violent crimes in their communities and all of these different things, influenced by the corporations choosing a particular narrative that's extremely narrow in scope and giving it to the rest of the world as an ambassador of the
yeah.
culture, right? So this has real world effects in that what we're not recognizing in doing this is that the same companies that are doing that or encouraging to have that done are also invested in private prisons, are also invested in other businesses that are connected to the incarceration of and the death of young black and brown kids. So when we take a step back and we just look at our education system and how we know that prisons are built off of third grade test scores, when we take a step back and we start to recognize that we do have a problem with violence and the exposure of violence in America, let alone hip hop culture, we have to take a stand. And hip hop, I refuse to have hip hop serve as the scapegoat for why America is, especially considering that I know hip hop culture and I know the history of it. And I know, in fact, that it started as an intercession between gangs. It actually made peace in the Bronx and made gangs put the violence away. And it gave young kids who had nothing, literally nothing, it gave them a new opportunity to be grounded in something positive, grounded in something new. They were redefining themselves. They were no longer chain snatchers and gangbangers. They were breakdancers and they were MCs and they were able to find their brilliance through this movement, right? Through this cultural movement that started literally as a party. So keeping in
Wow.
the foundational legacy of hip hop, right? It's important for us to say, hey, as a community, we know what's important. And we know that corporations don't have our best interest at heart when they take the most negative aspects of our culture and they put them on billboards. So let us work within ourselves to be self-determined and to be have a create an economic base of self-determination in order for us to tell the stories that we want to tell and insert those into the zeitgeist as alternatives to what the corporations have used as a business model.
That is so much better of a story to tell of the origins of hip hop coming from an activity of peacemaking than how it is, like you mentioned, stereotyped. And I have not heard that, and I think that is a story that that needs to be shouted from the rooftops so much more because that's such an amazing story. That's the origins of something like hip hop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Here are the numbers. Based on Pew Research studies, only 75% of white America does not have a personal friend of color. So they're only seeing people of color through the lens of hip hop culture. And if that lens is only directing people towards violence, misogyny, and all of these other things, then what does that look like in the real world? How do you expect a police officer who's patrolling the streets of Watts or Compton or New York City, how do you expect them to react to young black and brown kids if the examples of black and brown kid behavior is wrapped up in these stereotypes and these false archetypes, right? How do you expect judges to sentence kids when they see a young person in front of them? How are we humanized in this process? So the movement that we are creating through the hip hop arts education work that we do is to really essentially rehumanize black and brown young people in a way that makes it so that we're not seen as criminals and gangbangers. We're seen as creatives and untapped brilliance that is out there. You know what I mean? And I think that's an important story to tell. I think it's an important movement to take shape and really start to speak to it as a testament to the power of hip hop culture and how it can be used not only just for marginalized communities, but universally across the board and around the world.
Well, one more question on this topic, and then we could move on to the future and what you guys have planned. Corporations a lot of times make just black and white business decisions, and for better or worse, in this case, for worse. And it sounds like what you mentioned that there are a lot of instances where they're almost requiring or forcing artists to talk about parts of their life or share stories that you said perpetuate the negativity around a stereotype.
Right.
They're doing that for business reasons. Why? And I think you started to touch on it. You started connecting some corporations to vested interests in other industries.
Yeah.
But why would they force that if it's the right business decision? If people are listening to this, or they think people are listening to this as the reason why they're wanting to almost force artists to focus only on certain topics. What's behind that? What's fueling it? Is it just that industry overlap that you mentioned, or is it because it gets more clicks? Like there's vanity.
Yeah. Black and white business decisions. I think there's the danger in black and white business decisions is that it doesn't allow for nuance. It doesn't allow for us to think about those consequences. The tobacco industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they have black and white business decisions every single day. But there's also a resistance movement in educating people about, hey, there's a danger in using tobacco, right?
Mm,
Same thing in hip hop. There is a danger in promoting negative stereotypes of black and brown people. And we've seen it time and again. We've seen it whether it's police violence, we've seen it whether it's gang violence. There is a real world repercussion of promoting this particular brand of hip hop music as commercially viable and as successful as it is. So I don't necessarily get conspiratorial on it, although you can make certain arguments. But what I like to recognize is corporations who do not have a vested interest in the lived experience of the same people who are creating this culture are not thinking about those things in the boardrooms when they're making these decisions. The music
right.
industry, more recently than not, is now becoming the tech industry, where those cold-hearted decisions are being made, and it's really just to preserve the bottom line. So we are here like the analog in the digital space saying, hey, there needs to be a human being attached to these decisions. There needs to be humanity attached to these decisions. And there needs to be a broader scope of the stories that we're able to tell and be commercially viable. If we're only celebrating one specific kind of world, then we're missing out on this very vast and broad spectrum of experiences that can help young people. And we've seen the success of it in certain instances. It's not to say that there aren't outliers in the culture who do groundbreaking work. I would say Kendrick Lamar is one of those figures in our culture, right? Multi-million, multi-platinum artists who has all the commercial viability in the world, but it still has a sense of communal responsibility to make bold and political or social statements in his music, whether it's the Super Bowl, a music video, or a performance. He's able to really show the full depth and breadth of his experience. And if we're able to amplify artists who can do the same, I think you see a dramatic social shift. And Hip Hop for Change really wants to be on the front line of starting that from the ground up, right in the community, boots on the ground, local artists, teaching other aspiring local artists how to approach this culture responsibly and how to take what you have in this culture, in that you're learning a multi-dimensional way of thinking that can help you change your reality, change the communities that you come from, and band with like-minded people to have a bigger and more broader impact. So that's what we're doubling down on, and that's what we're hoping our partners and colleagues and allies in this struggle can help us with.
Oh, two things. One, what is something you're proud of more recently? And two, let's talk about the future of Hip Hop for Change and what you have planned.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think I was speaking with our program coordinator earlier today, and we're very proud to be working on a couple of different initiatives, but there's one in particular off the momentum that we got last year. Last year, we created our first Pipeline to Positivity program. This was a pilot program that I developed that then serves almost as a reentry program for systems impacted youth, taking kids who are either homeless, on probation, who have experience with juvenile detention, and giving them not only an artist development program, but a program that also instills personal growth and wellness. So they're learning about themselves throughout the course of this process of creating music, right? They're taking their personality test to learn who they are and what kind of jobs that can be available for them. They're taking their ACEs test, our ACEs survey, adverse childhood experiences, to learn how some of the trauma that they may have experienced in their life can impact them both physically and mentally. So these are things that kids aren't aware of just matter of factly, but if we're able to instill these personal growth and wellness tools within the artist development space, what you're getting is a refined human being just as much as a talented artist, right? So this is a program we launched last year, our first cohort. We were able to take 2 participants from that cohort overseas to Taiwan for them to collaborate with Taiwanese and Asian artists to curate their own shows, to work in the recording studio, and had an amazing time over the course of a week or 7 days in Taiwan. So that's something that we definitely want to replicate moving forward. So we're thinking about how do we broaden this to become very similar to the Next Level program that I'm a member of. How does Hip Hop for Change then create a diplomacy program, right? Where we're able to set up these cultural exchange missions in other countries, whether it's Nepal and working with the American embassy over there, or El Salvador, where we've been before, or in other spaces and places. I was an artist myself, and I was just on tour in the UK. And there's a lot of interest in the UK for hip hop education and culturally responsive arts education. Just building those kind of networks and building those partnerships, I think, is going to be critical come 2021. We're also launching a 24/7 radio network that's going to serve as a talk radio station, just at a time where, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is now losing funding and is now going under. We're trying to create a community-based response to that by creating this network so that people can share their ideas on live radio, but then also serve as a platform to amplify local artists. And then on the back end, use it as a workforce development program for kids to learn and have transferable skills as it relates to the world of broadcasting, where hip hop has been making a lot of inroads with podcasting and other programming in this space. So we just see the future is bright. We have our 3, 5, and 10-year plans. We're in a restructuring, so getting more people on our board of directors who can really help and serve as mascots and fundraisers for our programming, really building our donor and our community donor base through memberships. So by having a recurring donor of a certain amount, you're now able to get exclusive access to educational material, to merch, to events, all of these different things. So we're just reimagining everything that we've been doing that we know has worked and seeing how we can take it into the next level, bring it to scale, and have more of an impact.
Oh, so people that are listening, where could they go to learn more and what type of engagement? And I think you started to touch on it a little bit. What type of engagement are you looking for? And should people look for?
Yeah, I'm looking for monthly donors. I'm looking for volunteers. I'm really looking to deepen our relationship with our current community and expand it and bring more people into the fold. So people could check out our website, www.hiphopforchange.org. We have all of our programmatic offerings there. We have our recording studios, one in Oakland, there's one in San Francisco as well. Our Oakland space is free for young people 24 and under through a program we have called Writers Camp Wednesday, where kids can come in and record for free and have an educator there who can mentor them through the recording process. We also have a San Francisco studio that's 2 floors. Not only can you record music there, but you can also film music videos, Instagram reels, podcasting. Our second floor has a screen printing, so you can do hip hop fashion, right? These are spaces that we're looking to activate more and more as we come into 2026, along with the radio station and everything we're doing there. And then hopefully we can get a TV program sooner rather than later. That's another thing that we're working on. So our hands are in many pots, but we're very streamlined and focused on these things. It's better to measure twice than cut once. So we're very focused on working in these fields with intention and really building up our community donor base. So getting people involved, getting them to really help us with the general operating, getting that membership program going on. So you're incentivizing your community to really support you. But then further to that, just serving as an overall social enterprise through these recording studios, really building up the local artist community, creating that critical infrastructure and ecosystem that local artists need in order to have a living wage as an artist, which is extremely hard, especially in the Bay Area. That's one of the most expensive places on earth. It's being able to have people live freely and live in their passion without having to feel so bogged down by debt, by finances, by lack of opportunity. We're really here to create that movement of engagement. And then people are more than happy to volunteer with us. They can reach us on our website. They can follow us on Instagram as well, hip hop, the number 4 change. You can follow us on Instagram and engage and comment and share the work that we're doing with other people. We really want people who believe enough in us to be mascots and really rep the culture in the way that we know is appropriate.
Wow. Marlon, thank you so much. The work that you guys are doing is amazing, and hearing how it's evolved over the past couple of years is great to hear. Is there anything that we missed, or anything you want to leave us with before we wrap it up?
No, once again, just follow us on Instagram or check us out on our website, see how you can get involved. I'm always available. People can reach me directly, unlearn at hiphopforchange.org. And unlearn comes from my rap name. My rap name is Unlearn the World. So that's basically, I just included that as education
Yeah.
director. I thought it was ironic to have unlearn as my email address. So that's what I put there.
Awesome. Marlon,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your Monday, and we're honored to hear your story and to share your story. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll be talking soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.